Hey guys, welcome to MeiCode.org channel. In this video we are going to talk about started services. As you probably know, we shouldn't do heavy and time consuming stuff like downloading a file, like converting a file, like connecting to our database in the main thread. We have talked about this in Async Task video. I will put a link to that video in the description, so make sure to check that video if you need. But beside Async Task, services are another solution for doing your tasks in the background. Like activities, services are another main component of every Android application, and they are contexts by themselves. Generally, we have two kinds of services, bound services and unbound services, or as we might call them, started services. The difference between these two is that bound services are connected or bound to another component, for example, another activity or maybe even another service. And the life cycle of that bound service is related to the life cycle of its client. We will talk about bound services in another video. I believe it will be released tomorrow. I will put a link to that video in the description as well, so make sure to check that if you want. But in this video, let's start talking about started services. We can create a started service like any other Java class. We can right click on our package and by selecting new Java class, we can create that class. Let's name this class example service. In here we have two options. We can extend the service class, the one that comes from Android.app package. But there is a better and easier way, which I prefer to talk about that first, and that's extending the intent service class, this one. Working with this kind of started services is really easy, and all you need to do is to create a constructor and implement or override one method and do your job inside that method. Let's quickly see that. First of all, let's create the constructor. I'm pressing Alt plus Insert if you are wondering. I'm going to change this constructor. I don't need this name, so let's remove it from here. This name is going to be the name of the thread that we are going to create, and I'm going to pass it manually in here. For example, let's say download thread. That's all about our constructor. The only method that we need to override is onHandle intent. I'm pressing Ctrl I to get this pop-up menu. By selecting that, we can override our method. This onHandle intent method gets called whenever you start your service, and by default it will create another thread and do the job inside a worker thread, so you don't need to be worried about anything. You can also pass data via this intent that has been passed to this method. We can use this intent in here. For example, you can say try catch because this intent and its values can be null, so I'm going to avoid null pointer exceptions. It's just for debugging. And inside the try block, I can say, for example, int number is equal to intent.getIntExtra. We need a key, which I'm going to say number, and the default value, which I'm going to say -1. Later on, when we start this service, we will create an intent and we will pass this number to this intent with this exact key in here. For the default value, I'm going to say -1 because down in here I'm going to check that if number is not equal to -1, so do the job. If it is, leave it be. In this simple application, I don't intend to download anything or do any other time-consuming task. Instead, I'm going to mimic that time-consuming task. For example, in here I'm going to add a log up in here by typing log t and pressing tab. Down in here I'm going to create a for loop. For example, let's say for int I is equal to 0, I less than the number that we just received, and I plus plus. Let's just log the value of I. After logging that, I'm going to sleep my thread. I have few options, one of which is to say system clock.sleep and passing the time in milliseconds. So what I'm doing in here is that I'm receiving a number via the intent, for example 10, and down in here inside the for loop, I'm logging the numbers before that number, for example 0 through 10. After logging every number, I'm sleeping the thread for 1 second. This is essentially all the code that I need in order to create a started service. We just need to declare this service inside our manifest since it's a main component of every Android application. We can do that by pressing Alt-Enter in here and selecting this Add Service to Manifest, or we can do it manually in our manifest. Inside the application tag, I can type service and I can pass the name of my service. Essentially, that's all we need in order to declare our service, but we have other options as well. For example, we can set the exported in here to true or false. It means that do you want your service to be started from other applications as well or not? I'm going to pass false in here. The other attribute that we have in here is this description. So the user is able to see different background tasks of every application. For example, if one application is using too much data, the user can see different background tasks of every application. For that reason, it's better to put a description in here. For that reason, it's better to have a description for every service that you create. But you can't put your description in here manually. For example, I can't type my description in here. Instead, I need to create a string value resource and address it from here. Let's do that inside our values folder, inside the strings.xml. I'm going to create another string. Let's say service description. Let's just say this service is for downloading. Make sure to have a better description in here and don't follow my instructions specifically in this case. Okay, after creating your services, you can address them. For example, I can say add a string and I can address my string. That's all we need to do in order to declare our service. Let's just call our service from inside the main activity. In here, I can create an intent. Let's say intent is equal to new intent. This as the context and the name of our service as the second argument. If you have used intents before in order to navigate between different activities, you know that you would put the name of your activity in here, but since we are going to start a service, we are going to put the name of our service in here. After that, I'm going to put the number inside this intent. I'm talking about this number that we are receiving in here. This one, intent.getInt extra. So for that, I can say intent.putExtra. The key was number. It's better to have constants for these keys, but since it's not a real application, I'm just going to duplicating these keys. And for the value, I'm going to say 5. After that, I can say start service. If we wanted to start an activity, we could have called start activity, and by passing our intent, we could have do that, but in here I can call start service and I can pass my intent. As simple as that. Okay, our application is ready. Just before I test it, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm uploading new videos every day. And also hit that like button if you like the video. It's going to help me a lot with the YouTube algorithm. Okay, let's test our application. I'm going to select Pixel 2 with API level 28 just for no reason. As you can see in the logcat, we are printing the numbers. But what if we call this service 2 times? For example, in here, if I copy this start service once again and start our service twice, line after line, and if we run our application, you can see that the numbers are being printed, but they are not happening at the same time. It's waiting for one service to finish and it will start the next one after the first one. In some cases, this is not our desired behavior. Sometimes we might our task to happen simultaneously. The reason for this behavior is that because we are using the intent service in our service class. I'm talking about this intent service class in here. So whenever you extend the intent service class and override this onHandle intent method, this onHandle intent will do the jobs one after another and it won't do the tasks simultaneously. If you want to do your tasks simultaneously, instead of extending the intent service, you need to extend the service class. Let's do that. new Java class. Let's name this one second example service. In here I need to say extend the service class, the one that comes from android.app package. By pressing Ctrl I can see I need only one method to override, and that's onBind. But this onBind method is related to bound services, and in here I don't need to do anything with it, I just need to return null. Instead I'm going to override another method, and that's called onStartCommand. Essentially we had this method inside the intent service class. If you want to make sure, let's see that. I could have said onStartCommand in here as well. This onStartCommand method will happen before the onHandle intent. Essentially it will receive all the intents and will pass them one by one to this onHandle intent. In intent service class we didn't need this onStartCommand because onHandle intent was an easier way of dealing with the services, but inside the base service class we are going to need that because we don't have the onHandle intent method. So to have a flow of things, whenever we call our service, first of all the onCreate method will be called. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, services have their own lifecycle methods. They have onCreate, onDestroy, and as we can see in here they have onStartCommand, or in case it's an intent service we have onHandle intent as well. So first of all onCreate will be called, after that onStartCommand will be called. Probably your services will spend most of its life inside this onStartCommand method. After that, whenever we are going to destroy our service, this onDestroy method will be called. I don't need this onDestroy, but you can have all sort of initializing inside this onCreate method if you want. In this case I don't need it, so I'm going to remove onCreate. It's very important that you know that onStartCommand will happen inside the main thread. And if you want to do a time-consuming task, you need to create your own thread inside this onStartCommand. If you have checked the Android official documentation, in some places they mention the background, but that's somehow confusing. If you go deep inside the references, you can see that this onStartCommand is going to happen inside the main thread. So don't do any downloading or any other time-consuming task in here. What we can do in order to create a new thread in here is that I can say thread is equal to new thread by passing a new runnable to it. We can have our own thread. Later on we can call thread.start in order to start our thread. Let's delete this one for now. As you can see, we are receiving an intent up in here. Like an intent service, we can put numbers inside this intent as well. For example, like before, I can say try catch. We need to catch null pointer exceptions. And inside this try block, I can say int number is equal to intent.getIntExtra with a key of number and a default value of -1. Like before, let's have our check. If number is not equal to -1, and in here we can have our thread. For example, let's say thread is equal to new thread. We need to pass the runnable interface. It's just a basic way to create a new thread. Let's finish our sentence in here. Inside the run method, I can have my for loop as I had inside the intent service class. I think I can copy some of this from here. Let's copy the for loop. But I need to do some modification. First of all, I need to add the tag up in here, log t, and also I need to make my number final. By pressing Alt Enter, I can do that. After everything, I just need to start my thread. After creating it, I can say thread.start. Once again, since we are creating a new service, we need to declare our service inside the manifest. This time, let's do that by the help of IntelliJ. Let's say add service to manifest. Let's check our manifest. And as you can see, our service has been added in here. Let's also add the exported and description attribute as well. I'm just going to copy them from the above service. Okay, let's call our second example service from inside the main activity. Essentially what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change this example service to second example service. Okay, let's test our application. As you can see in the logcat, our two calls to services are happening simultaneously. That is perfect. Okay, there is just one last thing that I need to talk about regarding services, and that's stopping services whenever you are done with them. Whenever you create a started service like this in here, you are responsible for stopping your service because you don't want to drain the battery life via your application, or you don't want to use too much networking. For that reason, you are responsible for stopping your services. And the way you can do that is by calling on destroy, and after that you can say stop self if you are inside your service. This stop self will stop all the calls to this service. For example, right now we are calling this service 2 times in our main activity. If we call this stop self in one of those calls in different part of our service, all the calls to the service will be cancelled or will be stopped. If you want to be specific about each call, you need to pass an ID in here. And the ID is exactly what we have received in here inside the onStart command method, this start ID. I can save this, for example, let's save it inside the general member variable. Up in here I can say private int service ID. I can also initialize it to -1. And down in here inside the onStart command method, first thing I can set this service ID to this start ID. For that I can say this dot service ID is equal to the start ID. After that, inside onDestroy, I can pass my service ID in here. This way you would only cancel this exact call to your service. In some cases, onDestroy might not be a good place to stop your service. You may want to have some conditions, and upon those conditions stop your service, but it's one place. The other way to stop different services is from other components from the client side. For example, inside this main activity you can say stop service, and you can pass the exact intent that you have passed to your start service method. Let's pass that. In different part of your client component, you can use this stop service method in order to stop your services. Okay, that was our talk about started services. There is just one last thing that I need to talk about, and that's the limitation upon different background tasks beginning from API level 26 and higher. From API level 26 or Android Oreo, your services would only be alive when the user is working with your application, and if the user closes the application, your services will be destroyed as well. If you want your background tasks to be alive even if your application is closed, the alternative is to use job schedulers instead of services. Job schedulers have been introduced in API level 21. In fact, we are going to talk about job schedulers in 2 or 3 videos later. I will put a link to that video in the description as well, so make sure to check that if you want. Okay guys, this was our talk about started services. Just before I finish off this video, once again I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm uploading new videos every day. And also hit that like button if you like the video. It's going to help me a lot with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I have 100 more hours of content like this in the format of a course on my website. To this day, 30,000 students have enrolled in the course, and I believe if you want to learn Android app development in a professional manner, you would check the course at MeiCode.org. Besides Android app development, there are a lot more courses from me and other professional instructors on the website, like Java, Python, hacking, and different kind of marketing, which you can check if you're interested. See you guys in the next video.